We come to talk 3 today, and the topic will be framing, also called composition. How to frame and composite a shot. I have thought that should I talk focal length first? For sure that if you really know what focal length is, it may help you frame and composite. But then I finally realized that there is a difference between the two issues. Focal length is just a skill or technique, but framing is not a technique. Rather, it's a certain kind of methodology. It seems that there isn't any absolute skill to help you how to frame or composite. Nevertheless, there are really some methods or ideas to help you make the job better. So I decided to talk about the framing or composition first. So, what are the specific methods to help us to composite or frame? There are many materials on the internet or YouTube. Most talks would be, for example, the classical rule of thirds, spacing, the headroom, and loose space when shooting a portrait. The emphasizing of different layers, especially the using of the front layer. Symmetry or asymmetry, or try to make use of the lateral existing to help. For example, frame in frame, the vanishing point and the point of perspective. Or there is some special techniques. For example, putting your phone right under the lens to make a reflection of the image. I'm not intending to talk in detail about the above issue, except for the rule of thirds. In your frame, there are 4 lines, 2 vertical and 2 horizontal, equally splitting the image into line parts. You may just put your subject in the intersection point, and then you can result in a better or more comfortable image. Or you may put the land or sea on the lower horizontal line, or the sky could be placed around the upper line. I think you may take it for reference since there are some principles behind. Firstly, the idea comes from the visual psychology. And secondly, people have studied many good pictures and found that that is one of the commonalities. So it comes out the rule of thirds. However, I always wonder if that's so easy to achieve a good framing by just applying the above rule. Or if not, then can we say that there won't be any concrete ways for framing? Of course not. As I quoted in the topic, there are 3 ways for your reference in achieving a better image. And honestly speaking, I'm not going to teach you how to make a beautiful composition. Instead, I want you to know how not to make an ugly framing first. The 3 methods are: the first one, identifying the distract, ugly, and rubbishing information. I've seen it before when somebody shot. The model framing and the timing was not bad, but there was a pole just behind and on top of the head of the girl. Or there are many different lines or shapes in our real world, and accidentally there is a line just placed exactly on the girl's leg. And the most seen were many heads just stacked together. But you can't see that during filming since your attention was mainly focused on your target only. Only just she or he is in your eyes. And so you can't see any distraction or rubbishing information. And I suggest that before you look into your camera, you study the real situation with your naked eye. Try to find out such rubbishing information first. Of course, try to further review carefully after your filming to see if there is such unwanted information. But the most crucial point here is, I don't think there is any rubbish element in the photo. Or what is the problem with those elements? I just can't understand. Well, if so, that's really a big problem. Just because if so, it only verifies that we don't have the basic art sense or aesthetic judgment. We don't know what is good or bad. So how can we improve? That's simple. Try to shoot more and ask for others' comments, and through those practices, you will learn that what is not good for your picture. The second point is concerning the subjects in your pictures. Maybe not the main subject, or just certain objects appeared in the image. It is better for you to keep them as a total piece. That means we can see them as a whole from left to right and top to bottom. What does it actually mean? For example, if you intend to film a whole person, it is better to see the foot as well. Don't cut his foot or part of her arm without purpose. Try to give your model the all-around space. But sure, we often just film parts of a person, for example, a close-up or medium shots. At this time, you may take the golden section for reference. It divides a person into 7 sections with a better proportion look, and it may give you a more appealing feeling. Why do I emphasize this point to you? Just because all the time when you shoot, you may just pay all the focus and attention to your subject. But at the same time, there are of course many undesired objects that appeared in your image. Maybe there is a pavilion, a statue, or a certain iconic thing. But since you just focus on your model, and then you may neglect their existence and crop those things into a very bad composition and thus affect the image. But maybe you will say that the object is very big in size. And many times I found that when people were filming his friends and some big objects, they will go very close or underneath the big object to shoot. And in order to include the whole object, the people in the picture will inevitably be very small. Or if he wants to keep the people bigger, then the big object will be cropped. Or can you consider try to get away from the big object to shoot? The principle is try the best to leave at least 3 size spacing to those objects in your picture. The third point is very important but very simple also. Try to pay attention to your camera height. Why? I found many pictures or images are quite boring or not interesting, just because the photographers were standing to shoot all the times. It is understandable that in the past, when filming with the DSLR, you may just stand to shoot since you must look through the viewfinder. But now for the mirrorless camera or even for the DSLR, there are flip screens. But people are still just standing to film, even with a tiny mobile phone. Most cases I've seen are when parents film their little children. And of course, the children are very short in height. The parents are still just standing to shoot. The disadvantage here is, most of the time, we are already standing to see the world. And if you repeat again when filming, yes, photography is you try to frame the world in your way to show. But if it is just a repeat of an ordinary point of view, it will be not interesting. And secondly, when you are standing to shoot, your background, most likely from 2/3 or even to a whole, will be the ground only. So we may reconsider the issue. The simplest way is the height of your camera is around the chest of your subject. And if he or she is sitting, the height would be much lower. But remember, not the height of you or the photographer. Since I don't know your height, and once if you place your camera around the height of your model's chest, the vanishing point will then be at around the center of your image. And there won't be too much ground appeared, around only 1/3. And it also close to the proportion of the rule of thirds. So remember that the next time when you shoot, try to consider the height of the camera. Your image will enhance a lot by just change the height of your camera. After studying all those tips, skills, or different methods, you will find that there is one basic principle behind. That is, you have to think for your framing and composition. The best creation moment for your framings is not that time when you look through the viewfinder. Instead, looking through the camera is just a verification of your final image. The best would be you have thought and construct your composition before you leave the camera. Think beforehand is really important. And basically, if you can practice all the points stated above in your mind before looking through the camera, it will become a habit for your framing and composition. It will help you at least to do not a so ugly picture first. Yes, let us doing a non-ugly picture first, then end up with other good elements. You may then result a better composition picture. And regarding our thinking, I will give you some more advices. Basically, there are 3 types of filming conditions that we can prepare beforehand. They are totally passive, half passive, and wholly active. And let us talk about totally passive first. That means both your subjects and your camera position are being limited and cannot be moved by your design. For example, when you film in a moving car during your journey, you are totally passive in filming condition. You can't direct the car's movement, nor you can control the happening in the street. Sure, that is absolutely total passive. Maybe there's something you can still have a control, for example, your height, but not inside a car. But if you are standing in the street, for example, you can change a bit. And you may still have a control of the choosing of focal length. And you can still achieve different framing with different focal length. So, though you have limitations, you may prepare a zoom lens in advance. Moreover, though you can control the car or the happening, you can pan your camera. So, you may apply burst shooting to capture the moment in the street. And I will try to talk more this point in the street slab session. And then, what is half passive? You can't have a control over an object, but you can move to anywhere. Left, right, front or back. Lift up the camera and even lie on the ground. Such situations appeared when, for example, models filming for a certain group, or filming during tour or journey. Although you can't move anything, you can move yourself. And under such condition, what can we prepare? And this time, I won't suggest using a zoom lens. I prefer using prime lenses. And since you can have a desired width of the perspective, and if you can have a well-controlled depth of field, you can then make choice and achieve your photos through your position changing. This will be a better method for this situation. Nevertheless, although I still love to bring a zoom lens to journey, I still conclude that a prime lens is better for you in half passive condition. We then come to the last condition, wholly active. What does it mean? It's really simple to be understood that you can move anything, any objects, yourself and the camera position. And it's very interesting that it's really demanding under such condition. And I found that the most of the time, the worst results of photos are in such condition. Because it reflects your art and aesthetic sense. And sometimes under limitations, since you can't change the existing things, you can just capture the most beautiful side. But in opposite, when you have full control, you have to deal with everything. For example, focal length, position, how to place, lighting, or any interesting objects, all have to be taken into consideration. And under such condition, I will say that no more absolute technique. It's rather a whole reflection of your past experience. But of course, you can learn and retrieve from your past experience that got appreciation from others. For example, if a zoom lens really helped you, all the most liked photos are those filmed with a f1.8 50mm lens. So, even under wholly active condition, you may apply your past best practice and experience to shoot. Is there any difference in framing and composition between still photos and video filming? And honestly speaking, for a static shot, there is no big difference. The only difference may be the aspect ratio, 4:3, 3:2 versus 16:9. It will just depend on your habits. For example, 16:9 is wider and seems more cinematic. But of course, many people still love 4:3 for still photo. And since for the wider 16:9, there will be a chance of including more rubbishing information on both left and right sides. So that will be the only difference. But concerning the approach, there won't be a big difference for a static shot. And just for reference, in certain ugly locations, video framing is comparatively easier than still photos. It is because you can apply camera movement in the video filming. For example, you've tried many angles and approaches, but you can't still satisfied with the composition in an ugly room. And camera movement may distract the attention of the audience on the environment. Of course, the movement of cameras is another kind of knowledge of storytelling, not the case that moving without purpose. But in video filming, when you are dealing with a place without feeling and mood, camera movement can indeed help your framing effect a bit easier. If you want to improve your sense in framing and composition, I will highly recommend you to use a tiny sensor camera, or you can try with a longer depth of field. I've discussed before in the previous episodes that large sensor camera can help you to achieve a more eye-catching photo easier. Since large format camera can have a shorter depth of field, that make your subject more outstanding and your photos more three-dimensional. But once you are used to be helped with the shorter depth of field, you will develop a lazy habit in framing and composition. You may find that in film school, students always started with tiny format. For example, 8mm, 16mm or DV camera, just using a tiny sensor camera at the beginning. The depth of field is comparatively longer, and under longer depth of field, it will easier to happen those previous mentioned bad conditions. For example, many disturbing lines or objects, many heads are overlapping together. So my conclusion is, try to use tiny format or sensor to improve your framing and composition skill. And through practices, you may make it as a habit and then develop it as your own system. And then when you come back to the bigger size formats, you can achieve a better framing or composition a lot easier. The last item would be the stretch slab. Which condition is the stretch slab belong to? I will say that most of the time is half passive, or sometimes even totally passive. Since sometimes you can't move or have a choice, though you are in a street, but most of the time are half passive. And under such condition, as I told before, it's better for you to use a prime lens. Or you can bring along with a shorter range zoom also. Just a 2 to 3 times zoom for convenience. But the most important is, you think before with the lens and subjects, so you have already a rough idea of how you approach the photos. For example, what backgrounds? The distance between the subject and the background. How will you change when the distance is different? Indeed, it's a very good and interesting challenge that makes people love stretch slab. You can have choices, but there is certain limitation. And the most challenging is, you have to catch the best moment to make your photo impressed. Not just framing or composition, and you have to deal with many things. So, stretch slab is also good practicing for framing and composition. Or you will curious that some people just suddenly take out their camera to slab. How can they manage a good framing and composition? And I will tell you, maybe there is a skill and habit after 1,000 times of trial. He already knows the best position, height and angle to do that. And it will achieve around 70 to 90% of his design effect. And if he can catch the best moment, it will make him a perfect photo. I will still recommend, since the happenings are going to keep changing, you may apply burst shooting for a better result. I will say that there won't be any methods or ways to help you achieve a good framing or composition, since that's a whole reflection of your art and aesthetic sense. But I always remind myself, especially you are in wholly active condition, is that everyone will shoot in a particular way. So I should also shoot in that way or not. There must be some advantage, otherwise they won't be the same. But if I follow, the photo may be just a repeat. So I will go through the thing. Is there any different ways or angles to make the photo more unique and interesting? Finally, let me repeat, those 3 methods are just helping you not to make an ugly photo. You have to improve and train yourself as a whole. Yes, many things to follow up.